going to turn off the video, I suppose. I hope.
ഒന്ന് പേരോട് ചോദിക്കാനോ ആരെങ്കിലും അടുത്ത് കാണാണ്ടോന്ന്. Start only in 1 minute.
എന്താണ്?
ആരെങ്കിലും കിട്ടുന്നുണ്ടോ? അതിഥി കിട്ടുന്നുണ്ടാവില്ല. Okay, she says tomorrow 3 p.m.
Okay, go to live stream, see if anybody has joined. Go to the live stream YouTube, see if anyone has joined. For 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay. Aditya kittunna, Aarti kittunna.
Ramesh?
Hi Ramesh, were you planning to be at the live stream session? No. I was asking if you were planning to be there. The reason is that we just went live, okay, started streaming, and we want somebody to be able to tell whether it's working or not. Oh, okay. All right, thanks. Okay. Yeah.
Shall I just say hello?
Hello, we are here.
Okay. So we'll just turn it off in 10 minutes.
Yeah. Shabarish, hi. Hi, Shabarish. Can you hear us? Sunset also.
Yeah.
I'm here too.
It's okay.
Can you hear? Yes.
So there doesn't see anybody other than Sabarish and Ramesh. And maybe the generalization is only those people whose names and then sh are here. Yeah.
Remember. Hi, Aditi. Hi. I was calling just to see if you could check if we are doing okay, because we'd gone live stream and wanted you to check. Looks like we are, because Shabarish and Ramesh are here. And they can hear this conversation. Okay, all right. That's fine. Okay, all right then. Talk to you later. Yeah. Bye.
Yeah.
It shows.
Nobody else.
Oh, hi Aditi.
Hi Aditi. Hi Aditi. So that makes it 3 hours earlier. Earlier generalization is obviously false.
What is?
Because we had said only all and only the people who. Oh no, I cannot say all and only, because the Shabarish and Ramesh and in Esh, but
I see.
Vignesh,
Okay.
Vignesh and Dish don't. They're not here, so it's okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. You've got to.
Yeah, I will look at. I look at the camera.
Please. Otherwise, I'll get a scolding from Ramesh.
Yeah. Ramesh, is it okay? But anyway, if there aren't people other than among the participants.
Okay, for now. Oh, we can have a conversation.
Yeah, so it doesn't matter if.
I think what we'll do is we'll wait for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
If nobody comes, then in the meantime, Shabarish can ask if he wants.
Yeah. So, Shabarish, what do you want us to give a sermon on?
Kanna.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll wait.
Yeah.
Very cluttered background.
That's okay. And we didn't get any questions from anybody, did we?
No, which is why we're not having any more live streams.
Yeah.
This is the last.
This is not going to be.
No, this is the last one.
Not going to be productive. Yeah.
We have a list of persons. Actually, Ramesh, no, we had asked for questions, but no questions came in. And there was only one person who had expressed an interest in it right at the beginning. But we had, despite that, we had several people.
There are two more. A few people have joined. I don't know who they are.
Joined, yes.
Yeah. So in addition to Ramesh, Aditi, and Shabrish, there are two more people. I don't know who they are.
Aarti, hi
Aarti.
Aarti.
Okay, it is Aarti. So there is one other person, unidentified person.
Aarti is the other person I called.
There is Arpita. Hi, Arpita.
Okay, hi Arpita. Hi.
Yeah. So we haven't received any questions, so you guys have to start asking. Otherwise, we'll just sit there doing nothing.
And if you don't have any questions, then hi.
Yeah.
If Arpita and Shabarish don't have any questions, then we'll wait a few more minutes and close shop. Yeah?
Yeah.
We did. We sent
that?
out,
Yeah.
Ramesh, we did send out a message and reminders again and again saying we want questions by Saturday. We didn't get any questions at all. So.
Okay,
Just a minute, yes. Aditi.
Yeah. Yeah, unless enough number of people have signed up, and if they have sent questions, we shouldn't have a together. I don't. So the people who have newly just joined, questions?
Yeah, who has joined?
Okay, Arpita asks, we have learned subjects based on theories and certain principles. I am not sure what you mean by subjects based on theories. How do we decide what the premises are? We decide what the premises are by identifying the conclusions that we want to justify, and then which premises would give those conclusions. That's the only way. Unless it is we're talking about a well-known theory, such as, for example, the evolutionary theory, atomic theory, optics, and things like that. For that, you figure out what the premises are by reading something that tells you this is the theory.
I'm still not clear on what you mean by we have learned subjects. Do you mean certain topics or certain phenomena?
Gravitation theory of motion is a subject. And how do we figure out what the premises are? Yeah, actually textbooks, I don't know if textbooks actually spell out the premises of the theory. That you will have to figure out what the premises are by reading better textbooks.
Aditi has a question. I've been curious. A conjecture in mathematical inquiry is similar to a hypothesis in scientific inquiry. What is the counterpart of a prediction in mathematical inquiry? Does it have one? Yes, theorems.
Theorems are predictions.
Theorems are the predictions.
Yeah. The word hypothesis in scientific theory is, the meaning is not quite clear. It could mean an observational hypothesis that you want to find out, you want to test. That's one. It could also mean a theoretical hypothesis. It could mean a hypothesis that you want to test, or a hypothesis which has been established. So the word hypothesis is used in science to mean all of these. So it's a very confusing state. It's an unclear word. Yeah, Arpita says by subject she means various theories in science.
Yes. And yes, textbooks do not mention the word as premises.
Yeah.
True. So what are the assumptions? What are the things that you deduce you arrive at your conclusions from? What are the statements? Those would be your premises. Hi, Priyanka. Hi. Yeah, Ramesh, with what Mo said just now, hypothesis is not exactly similar to, not identical to conjecture.
Yeah. Well, it sometimes it can mean conjecture.
Yeah, in some cases.
Right.
And we do look to prove conjectures, because when when conjectures are proved is when they become theorems in mathematics.
Yeah.
So to that extent, that meaning of hypothesis is the same as conjecture.
Yeah.
It's when a theoretical hypothesis that has already been established, that's also called a hypothesis. That's when it varies from conjecture.
Yeah. So if you say something like a research proposal which says, in this research, I wish to test the hypothesis that there is a correlation between doing homework and grades that you get. That's exactly like a conjecture. This is something that you think is right, but there's no evidence yet. And you want to get data to test whether this conjecture is true or not. This is one meaning of the word conjecture in the so-called hypothesis testing model of research in science.
We don't really call it proving hypothesis, right? Yeah, testing hypothesis.
Testing, yeah.
Establishing, testing, and therefore establishing a hypothesis as a conclusion. Yes. Seeing if the predictions, so what you deduce from the theory or from the premises through reasoning match the observations.
Yeah.
Yes.
Actually, in the physical sciences, especially in physics, when there is a theory, you deduce the predictions and you test the predictions. So this, you could say, this is the prediction testing model of research. This happens only if there is a theory. But in psychology, on the other hand, when there is no theory to deduce the predictions from, then you propose an observational conjecture, and then you call it hypothesis testing model of research. This is what is given in science textbooks. So these two, prediction testing and hypothesis testing, need to be clearly separated. Prediction testing belongs to theoretical work.
No, not only it's separated. Prediction is the you're testing outcome. The conclusion, the outcome. Whereas hypothesis, it's not the outcome yet.
Yeah.
So that's the counterpart of conjecture.
The other conjecture. Yeah.
Right.
Priyanka says, you mentioned sensory experience in one of the LTs. Could you please explain what exactly you mean by sensory experience?
Sixth sense. No, sensory experience is restricted to the five senses.
Yeah.
So seeing, hearing, tasting, smelling, and touching.
We don't know what the sixth sense means. At best, it is intuition. It is not sensory perception. Sense perception, what you see with your eyes, what you hear with your ears, in addition, of course, what you can measure with your instruments.
Ramesh says, if we do with data, then it becomes scientific, right? Yes.
Yeah.
Scientific, yes. Definitely not mathematical, because mathematics doesn't have data. What are the equivalents of hypothesis and predictions in philosophical inquiry? Okay.
In philosophical inquiry, we could say the ethical axioms that you start with. So, for example, take the axiom that it is ethically unjustified or ethically bad to destroy life. That's, suppose you take that as an axiom. From that, given that bacteria are living organisms, it would then follow that destroying bacteria is unethical.
And
now, that's a prediction. The question is, do our judgments, ethical judgments, do our ethical intuitions, shared intuitions, match that? If your shared judgment is that there is nothing wrong with killing bacteria, then you have to change. There is a conflict between the prediction and the grounds against which you test it, namely, in this case, shared introspective judgments. That's a counterpart of observation generalization in ethical theory.
Okay, going back to Priyanka's question, which Ramesh has pointed out, would you count intelligence as sixth sense? Intelligences are of different kinds. And if you broadly define intelligence as the ability to learn, put it very, very broadly, then is sixth sense the ability to learn? I'm not sure how to relate intelligence and sixth sense.
No, there is yeah.
If you have something like, and a sixth sense that senses something that's going to happen, or it doesn't necessarily. To sixth sense is intuition an element of intelligence? Yes. If intuition is an element of intelligence, you're right, Ramesh, it would contribute to sixth sense as well.
So let's say, for example, Ramanujan's ability to guess the right conjectures.
Right.
You could say the sixth sense. We don't know, because we don't know what gave him that ability. And you call it intuition, and Ramanujan called it Kali's, communication with him.
We're going into a nebulous kind of elusive region when we are asking about intuition. What is intuition? Is intuition the same as sixth sense? Depends on what exactly each of us means by that, right?
At best, the so-called sixth sense is a feeling that something is true. It is not a sense perception, it's a feeling.
So I guess it's in that sense that Priyanka is asking if intelligence is a sixth sense.
No, intelligence is a capacity, actually, a mental capacity.
Another kind of ability is to access knowledge. That is also a capacity. In that sense, isn't sixth sense or intuition also a capacity?
Intuition, intuition, like reasoning, is a source of knowledge. So is insight, so is imagination. And sense perception is yet another source, different from the other sources. And scientific claims are justified on the basis of sense perception or its equivalent in terms of instrumental perception. That's the definition of science.
Yeah, exactly. Shabarish says, if sixth sense is a feeling that something is true, then it's very similar to intuition. Yes, this is exactly what we were asking. Are they the same thing, sixth sense and intuition? And this is where these notions of sixth sense, intuition, insight, they evade defining Primitive concepts.
Yeah, I think it's best to treat intuition and insight as primitive concepts, like truth.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Truth is also very hard to define. So we pretend that everybody knows what we're talking about when we use those words. So Priyanka asks how we can find out objective reality. You see, by objective reality, I assume you mean a reality that exists independently of us. So we assume that long before humans came into existence, the human species came into existence, there were chimpanzees, there were rivers, mountains, and so on. And that which exists independently of our own experience, our own consciousness, is objective reality. And when we see something, we assume that the sensory experience that we have, the sensory perception of seeing, is triggered by something out there in the objective reality.
No, what is it? What if we don't have it for the particular phenomenon? You mean measuring, or an instrument for measuring, or objective reality? What, I mean, I don't understand the question, Priyanka. Knowledge and intelligence are acquired in most cases, while intuition is inherent in most cases. Intuition can also be trained by accepting, acknowledging intuitions and not suppressing them or pushing them away. Going back to Priyanka, do we require an instrument for measuring objective reality every time? No, we don't need an instrument. If we see an elephant before us and
if we see an elephant before us, unless we have reasons to believe that it's an illusion or hallucination,
but then
we interpret that to mean there exists an elephant in front of us independently of our consciousness.
If there are four of us and all of us see an elephant in front of us, that is intersubjective reality. So we assume that there is an elephant there. So there is no measuring involved in that, right?
So there are certain epistemic assumptions about making decisions on what exists as objective reality, but it is dependent upon our epistemology.
What does that mean? I think you need to you need to expand on that. So will a particular premise be the same for all, since by definition it's a proposition we take to be true on the basis of an argument?
Not on the basis of an argument, but as a starting point for an argument.
Yeah, it contributes to it's part of the argument.
And different people may consider different propositions to be true. That is true.
So you cannot build an argument unless there is an agreement on the premises.
Yeah. So, for example, in pre-Galileo's times, people assumed that Bible was the word of God, which was literally true. Galileo didn't subscribe to that premise. So there was no rational debate is possible if the starting points are different for different people. They are in conflict.
What if four of us see an elephant, but it doesn't get captured in a camera? Then obviously all four of us are hallucinating at the same time.
Yeah. Of course, your epistemology assumes that the camera is a better guide to objective reality than our perception, right? If you make that assumption, yes.
And you also make the assumption
Yeah.
that it was not a hologram that somebody had created,
Yeah.
which was not accessible to a camera. Then, I mean, you have to make all of those assumptions for that to happen, to explain something like that.
So there was actually a debate during Galileo's time that what you saw through the telescope, the instrument, was some distortion created by the instrument, that it is not real. So unless we trust our instrument, unless we have reasons to believe that what our instruments tell us have something to do with the object, the reality outside, then what the instruments tell us
is also
is,
not.
So built into every instrument is a theory, actually. Built into the telescope, built into the microscope, there is a theory. Yes. Yeah.
Again, an epistemological issue there. A question of which is more reliable, sensory perception or an instrument like a camera.
Yeah. So take something like during the witch hunt period, there was a way of measuring or finding out whether somebody a burning hot iron and put it on the witch's tongue. If it is not a witch, if she's telling the truth, then it will not burn. But if it burns, then she's a witch. Now, this is an epistemic, principle that the people subscribe to. We don't subscribe to it. But for the people who do subscribe to it, that's a very reliable test.
Yeah, Vignesh is asking, does the theory also include epistemic commitments?
Yes. Behind every theory are assumptions. Beneath the theory, ontological assumptions and epistemic assumptions, and also rules of logic that we also assume. So these are the foundations for a theory.
All of which we often take for granted.
Yeah.
Unless questioned and we're forced to make explicit.
Yeah. Ontology is a set of assumptions about the nature of reality. So, for example, I assume that there is an objective reality which exists outside of me, and that can be questioned, and it has been questioned by philosophers. So this is the realistic ontology. The other one is, not realistic ontology. Realistic meaning assumption of realism.
Juxtapose ontology and epistemology.
Yeah, ontology is a bunch of assumptions on what can be counted as knowledge, whereas that is epistemology. Ontology, on the other hand, is a set of assumptions about the nature of reality as a starting point before you build theories. So, for example, in the geocentric theory had the ontology that the world was created by a creator who is perfect, and that circle is perfect and God cannot create elliptical orbits. And that ontology was a powerful deciding factor for theory construction in geocentric theories. And when Kepler discovered that his measurements didn't quite match the circular orbit, and he had to move to elliptical orbit, and he found it very difficult initially because this ontological assumption about God and perfectness of circle came into conflict with the empirical evidence. So he ultimately abandoned the ontology.
Okay. Is ontology and epistemology mutually exclusive?
No, not. What happens is epistemology is often derived from ontology. So if you assume that the world is governed by a small set of principles which are logically consistent, this is your ontology. From that, the epistemic assumption that knowledge must be logically non-contradictory, that the premises of knowledge, ultimate premises of knowledge must be smallest possible, etc. These things would follow.
Okay, there are two questions. Priyanka says the physical reality like temperature, seeing elephant will be common for everyone. But what about linguistics or sociological phenomena? Language phenomena are also accessible to everyone, right? And so too sociological phenomena. It's their interpretation that differs.
Yeah, let's take an example. So for the community of English speakers, let us say, that's a community. If you give them the sentence, John saw Mary, they will accept it as a grammatical sentence. But if you say something like, Mary John saw, well, actually, Mary John saw is possible.
Yeah, it's possible. But if you say something like John see Mary.
John see Mary, yeah. They would. Or
John will see Mary tomorrow, yesterday. John will see Mary yesterday would be.
Yeah. Or better, John will see Mary versus John see will Mary. That's definitely, the second sentence is definitely rejected by speakers of English.
How will we find out objective reality in these fields? What does objective reality in this case mean?
I guess, you see, for example, if you assume that black holes exist as objective reality, notice that a black hole is a theoretical construct. The epistemology tells you that black hole is an objective reality, that gravity is an objective reality. And this is what our theory tells you. So is a function of our epistemology and the theories that we construct.
So objective reality is, when it comes to language, you ask the question, how we will find out objective reality of these fields, right? That's a sentence you asked, and that's an utterance that is a sentence. The sentences that we're all uttering are sentences. Those are the only objective reality that you have.
The observational
reality. Beyond that, when we talk about subjects or objects or sentences and so on, those are all constructed. There's no objective reality to them, right? So, Ramesh, we need to define objective reality. Is it something that exists in distance, time, and form?
It could be, but needn't be. But objective reality is defined as that which exists independently of human consciousness. So does gravity exist independently of human consciousness? Scientific epistemology tells you that, yes, it is.
Okay, we need to go back to Rashmi's question earlier.
What?
Is the assumption that if we can see, experience something, it must be real? Is that an ontological assumption, or is it an epistemological foundational premise?
If we can see, experience of something, it must be real. That is an epistemic assumption about what we must take as objective reality. This is an epistemological principle. That is, if all of us can see something, unless there is evidence to believe that what we see is an illusion, then it exists independently of us. That's an epistemic assumption that we subscribe to.
We can never come up with a counterexample to that. If we define something as existing independently of human consciousness.
There cannot be counterexamples to that, because it's a starting point.
Right.
It's an axiomatic, it's an article of faith.
In other words, it's something that cannot be proved.
Yeah.
And if it can't be proved, then it can't have a counterexample. Do you mean a particular value?
This is Shabarish's question.
This is Shabarish. Do you mean a particular value shown in an instrument when you talk about physical reality of temperature?
Yes. So take, for example, the distinction between mercury thermometer and water thermometer. Which is more reliable? We take water thermometer as more reliable measure of temperature than, sorry, did I
mercury,
say? Mercury thermometer is more reliable, yeah. But notice that in that accepting mercury thermometer as better, there is a theory built into the instrument itself about the expansion of mercury versus expansion of water.
And we don't talk about it, but instruments usually have their range of inexactness, and to take all of that into account. So stuff like corporation, stock market, religion do not come under objective reality.
That's an interesting question, because these do not exist independently of human consciousness. So now we have to change the notion of objective reality. Or if you want to accept that, let's take a better example. Are dreams examples of objective reality? Dreams do not exist independently of human consciousness. That's very clear. So one way of responding to that question would be yes. Given our definition of objective reality, dreams are not objective reality. Is pain objectively real? No, it is not. By this, pain is subjective reality, not objective reality. But that doesn't mean subjective here does not mean false. It is true.
Yeah, nor is it to be sort of looked down on, which I think many of us tend to do. Objective is real and subjective is wishy-washy. It's not. Yeah.
So actually, there was a distinction that Galileo made between primary and secondary attributes. So for Galileo, wavelength was a primary attribute, but color is not a primary attribute, it's a secondary attribute, because color is a matter of the human interpretation of wavelength and other wavelength and amplitude and so on, intensity. So for Galileo, the only reliable thing was the primary attribute, not the secondary attribute. However, for somebody who wants to study neuropsychology, then color perception is
a primary,
as
an important.
That's what you want to study.
Yeah. I think Ramesh's "What if pain is measurable?" We'll go to Rashmi's after that. Rashmi's interpretation of Priyanka. What if pain is measurable?
Even if pain is measurable, there is a perception of pain, whether something is more painful or less painful, etc., is a subjective interpretation. So there are various neurological disorders. So hypersensitivity, there are people for whom even touching the skin on your face is extremely painful. And it is very difficult to measure that. It is also culturally conditioned. So even something like color, the relation between color perception and the actual wavelength and amplitude, etc., those connections are extremely indirect and complex. So I don't think they are measurable. You can measure those and arrive at conclusions, that's all. They are not directly measurable.
Okay. Two interpretations that Rashmi and Shabarish have raised. Priyanka's question, I'm wondering if there is a confusion between objective, subjective reality and nature of data. And Shabarish says confusion between absolute truth and objectivity, objective reality.
Okay.
And this is where the concept of qualia comes in, he says. Okay. Yeah.
So objective does not mean true. Objective is one way of thinking about it. Now we are changing the meaning of the word objective. Unfortunately, when you say objective reality and objective statement, we are assigning two different meanings for the word objective. The conclusion that X is objective reality does not mean necessarily that it is infallibly true. So for instance, right now we assume that fundamental particles are not divisible. Things like electron is not divisible. We take that to be objectively true, but that doesn't mean it is infallible. It might turn out that this conclusion is false.
Yeah, and being measurable did not make it objective reality.
Yeah, right.
Yes. Going back to, again, what Rashmi pointed out, confusion between objective versus subjective reality on the one hand and nature of data on the other. Yes, true.
Yeah. Variability across perceivers is one meaning of the word subjective. So these two words, objective and subjective, have been used with so many different meanings, and currently different people have so many different meanings assigned to these, that we need to have definitions of objective and subjective, like objective 1, objective 2, objective 3, at least about half a dozen. Otherwise, it's very difficult to untangle this spaghetti plate.
And yes, in the case of language and society, it is really the nature of data that we're talking about. And yeah, how do you tie up nature of data with objective and subjective?
Okay, let's take for example, suppose you want to create a scientific theory of ethical ethics. Ethics is better.
All right. Okay.
Suppose you want to study a community. There is a community where, given some thought experiments, such as, for example, you say, for example, some man marries 5 women, and the people in that community say that's okay, there is nothing that is immoral about it. And then you ask them, what about one woman marrying 5 husbands? And the community says, oh, that is extremely immoral. Now, that is judgments from that community. Now, what you can say is that these people judge such and such situations as such and such. It doesn't mean that those judgments are, in a certain sense, objectively real. That is, they exist independently of the interpretation of the people. But then you can still build a theory of the ethical judgments of that community. So you can write a scientific paper saying such and such community has such and such ethical theory.
And that's your data.
Based on such data, based on experimental evidence, because you are giving some situations to the people, and the people are responding. You're treating people like guinea pigs.
They're experimental subjects.
Yeah.
So to that extent, it is well, if you want to call it objective. It's not cooked up by the researcher, by the researchers' subjective interpretations, right?
So, anybody can cross-check. That's the advantage.
Priyanka, does that make sense? Does that answer your question? Yes, the nature of conclusions is also different.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
So given the same data, the same perceptions, different people can come to different conclusions.
Yeah. So, does this mean that no more questions?
So we've had 3 participants so far.
More questions from the Think members. Yeah.
Please wait.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, we'll wait.
All right.
Can these type things,
Be
is that
seen?
visible to everybody?
Yeah.
Oh, so we don't have to repeat.
It's a good idea to repeat because
Okay.
you know which of those questions you're responding to.
Okay.
He's got a Sharish is a long question.
Rashmi. Gearing up for Shabri's
Yes,
question.
exactly, Rashmi.
Yeah. What is that yellow thingy at the end of Rashmi's question?
I don't know. I've never seen that before.
Is that a swan? Yellow swan?
I don't know.
Hmm.
Rashmi will have to answer that question. It's a bicep curl. Okay.
Oh.
Never thought
See
of that.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. Gearing up for that. Okay. We've been defining rationality as avoiding logical contradictions. Different modes of inquiry use different logical frameworks. Given this, can a question be under two different domains?
What he means is whether or not there is a logical contradiction depends upon the system of logic that we are using.
The particular framework.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
The framework of logic.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that is right.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, if you're using a defeasible system of reasoning, then there may not be a logical contradiction under certain circumstances. But if you're using non-defeasible classical deductive reasoning, it might result in a logical contradiction. So what constitutes a logical contradiction can be a function of the system of logic that we are using. Priyanka says, yes, yes, but I don't know if that is definitely not a question. I don't know what she's saying yes, yes to.
I guess, can this, given this, can a question be under two different domains? Yes, yes, or yes, yes, please answer that. Aryan. Hi, Aryan. Are you joining this group?
Yeah.
Okay. Just for the others, Aryan is a dancer. He's 10 years old. He is in 6th grade, right, Aryan?
And he's right across in the other apartment on the floor.
He's across from us, and he gives me feedback on what we write. Yay! Yes, yes.
He has also created a video.
Yes.
On
an
the
animation
for
on the white crow.
White crow dialogue. Yeah.
I think we're
getting to
we're getting to the end of this. That was good. Yeah. Okay. How long have you been there?
He must have just logged in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So more questions?
Right now. Okay. Oops.
That is Tara's telephone.
Hi, Aditi. Hello.
More clarification on the concept of incommensurability. Whoa. Incommensurability.
Hi.
Incommensurability is a concept that was popularized by Thomas Kuhn.
Okay. All right.
All right. And what Kuhn said was that observations, what he said, actually, I don't know if it is, Priyanka, this is going to take a long time. This is a Kuhnian muddle, and to unpack the muddle, it'll take at least about 10-15 minutes.
Yeah, and you should probably set that aside.
Yeah.
For now.
Yeah.
I'm not worried, because I don't think we're worrying about it in the course. It doesn't come in except in that one conversation, the banana chips conversation.
Yeah.
So, I think let's leave that aside.
We should probably delete that reference to incommensurability.
Yes.
Yeah. Because it's a muddle created by Kuhn in the philosophy of science.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so unless there are any more burning questions, I think, I think there were questions that came up today that actually we need to think about.
Yeah.
And
they were very good questions.
Yes.
and challenging questions.
Challenging questions, yes. Yeah. And if you think more about it and discover something, tell us also.
Yeah.
And anything else anyone wants to say?
It was an enjoyable conversation.
Right. And Aryan, your coming in made it even
it was
nicer. So yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
okay.
I guess,
so shall we say
bye for now?
Bye?
Yeah.
Wait.
Okay.
Sabarish. Okay.
Epistemology of this is different. Given this, a pragmatic conclusion might not be the same as an ethical conclusion to a question. What form of inquiry do we choose between the two? I'm not sure I understand that question.
Okay, first of all, epistemology of different disciplines, there might be some differences. An obvious difference is that the epistemology of mathematics is different from the epistemology of science. The way we accept something as true in mathematics is different from the way we accept something as true in science. There is an obvious difference. Likewise, the epistemology of ethical inquiry is different from the epistemology of both mathematical inquiry and scientific inquiry. But the question is, yes, granted that such epistemic differences exist, do they have something that is common to all of them? And the answer is yes. There is a shared epistemology, and then there are epistemological differences. And we need to understand both what is shared and how they differ, right? And they are appropriate for different kinds of.
Yeah, and a pragmatic conclusion might not be the same as an ethical conclusion. Yeah. In fact, we see that around us all the time, don't we? The pragmatic decisions that people take often counter the ethical conclusion. So, okay.
Prandeep says that he didn't understand the above question. Which question is that?
No, Shabri, we just answered that.
Shabrish's okay.
Question.
So we have answered Prandeep's question as well. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, guys. So.
All right. So.
Thanks a lot.
We'll see you.
Sometime.
When is there? Yeah, that's right.
Sometime.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
All right then.
So bye.
Okay. Bye.